Good morning and a very warm welcome indeed to today's Movers and Shakers virtual event. My name's Lee Natasha Salter and I'm Managing Director for Movers and Shakers. So welcome to our long-standing members, our new interim members, and of course those of you who are totally new to Movers and Shakers. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, it's our 25th year actually this year of running Movers and Shakers Property Networking Forum. We've had membership since the beginning, and the idea is to bring together the decision makers, the key players, the leaders in our industry to network, to come together and do business. And of course, we absolutely love putting on great events with key speakers and great debates. We're trying to emulate the same kind of format with our virtual events, and hopefully you're all enjoying these. If you've missed any of the virtual events, do go to our YouTube channel. We've got these uploaded. Do view, do enjoy, and please do subscribe. So this morning we have one of our webinars, and the topic is Repurposing London's West End, A New Dawn. And it's in association with the New West End Company, which is of course the UK's largest retail and leisure bid business improvement district. And for our panel today, we welcome Jace Tyrrell, who is of course the Chief Executive of the New West End Company, and Brian Bickell, who is the Chief Executive of Shaftesbury and also a freehold board member. We have Councillor Rachael Robathan, who is new leader of Westminster City Council, and Sheila King, who is the founder of Sheila King International, an independent retail strategic advisor. And our chair today, good friend Susan Freeman, who is partner of Mishcon de Reya. Thank you to all for joining us this morning. Now, London's West End is clearly the premier retail and leisure destination for the world. It's been shut for an unprecedented 3 months. It's now slowly reopening into a new world. The trends clearly accelerated that was happening towards more online shopping. Some retailers have survived lockdown and some have not. So the West End's really looking at replanning and repositioning itself. And Jace, the West End Company, and all of the key stakeholders are getting involved to create a new vision for the West End. It's now been estimated that there will possibly be about 30% less physical retail space in the next 5 years. So what's going to replace retail? Will it be hospitality? Will it be residential? Will it be offices? I'm going to leave the experts to answer these questions and more this morning, and they'll know the opportunities ahead, but also the challenges that have to be overcome. I'm now going to hand you over to Susan and to the panel. Don't forget, you can ask questions via the Q&A tab, so please do so, and I know the panel will try to include as many as possible. Thank you very much. Good morning and enjoy.
Thank you, Lee. Good morning, everybody. So the West End is famous internationally for being London's most vibrant area. It's famous for its shopping, its dining, theatre, culture, and history. So after 3 months of lockdown, the area is beginning to reopen, and I am really looking forward to hearing from our panellists this morning on what we should expect in the short term and in the long term, and whether we are looking at a new dawn for the West End. So, Jace, let's start with you. Congratulations on phase 1 of reopening the West End. How's it really going? And what are the immediate challenges for you and your members?
Right. Good morning, and thank you for the introduction, Lee, and also to Susan, who is a friend of the West End and an avid shopper of the West End, which we're very much looking forward to seeing Susan and others back in the weeks and months ahead. Yes, we have reopened, and just before we sort of talk about that, I just want to do a brief shout out to the incredible frontline workers that went through that 12 weeks of lockdown. The security personnel, there were retail staff, property managers, frontline with the local authority, Westminster Council, supporting residents, and actually it was the most incredible spirit of support we've never seen. And I hope one of the legacy pieces, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is how we can continue in that work, both at a local and a sort of international level. So you're right, Susan, we have reopened, and there was a lot of work by the retailers, particularly to get ready. We had a sort of a false start. We were ready for the 1st of June, and actually the 15th of June was our sort of start date. A lot of information to work through in terms of being COVID secure, really thinking about colleagues coming back to work in retail, but also customers to give that confidence to come out in public spaces and then come into obviously retail. So we had a very good first couple of days. There was a lot of pent-up demand and a lot of conversions, a lot of spend happened those first couple of days. I have to say it has leveled the last couple of weeks. We haven't moved beyond sort of 20%, if you like, where the country is averaging about 50%. And what that really shows us, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this morning on the panel, is that link between the all-important office sector. 95% of people that work in the West End are actually outside of Westminster. So, you know, there's a huge London sort of ecology of people that work in the West End. Obviously for tourism, it's going to be quite some time till they return. And so I think for the all-important hospitality and leisure sector, which I'm sure Brian will come on to, which has its opening this weekend, when we start to open up some aspects and other bits of the economy in the West End, we hope that will start to drive demand. But it's going to be slow. And it's going to take time, and we need to build that confidence. And I think the one key message back to anyone who's talking to government and others is consistency is really important, to come back to the office, to get onto public transport when it's safe. And I think that's really going to help us in the short run. And then I think in the medium to longer term, there's some policy changes and structural changes that we'll come on to. But headline is we've opened. Everyone is welcome. It is safe in the West End when you get there. But I think it's going to be gradual as we expected. And we need to give it a bit more time, but we need to start to build that confidence.
And have there been any surprises? Have you seen the sort of revenge spending that we saw in China? What's going on?
I think we expected from all the feedback from businesses in China and also operating in Europe, because they were ahead of us, if you remember, sort of 3, 4, 6 weeks. That the conversions were going to be high. So you're right, people that came out in the first couple of weeks were very determined shoppers. When you've got nothing else open apart from the shops, there was definitely a desire to purchase. And I have to say the conversion rates were very high. You're sort of talking 90, 100% conversion. The average spend's much higher. But when you're dealing with sort of 20% of usual footfall, it's great. They're obviously spending some money, but it does become very sub-economic to open all the costs that we know with staff and opening your business as well. So I think it's really positive that there are a determined group of customers that want to be in the West End. I think now we have to keep that slow momentum building. But I think we were surprised the first day, and there was a lot of cash as well, curiously. So it might have been the profile of the customer coming in. They were holding a lot of cash over lockdown, but certainly a lot of cash transactions those first couple of days.
Yes, well, hopefully it will continue to build, because I think you forecast 15 to 20% footfall initially. I think just to manage people's expectations. So I suppose the key is to get people to keep coming and want to be there.
Yes.
So, Brian, let's talk about Shaftesbury. You own, I think, 15 acres in the heart of the West End, and that encompasses really iconic areas like Carnaby Street, Seven Dials, Chinatown. And you're really focused on restaurants and leisure and retail. How is the easing of lockdown working from your perspective? What are you seeing?
Thank you, Susan. Well, we live in interesting times, as they say, and it was unfortunate that F&B has sort of trailed in the opening, and of course we shall start to see from this weekend onwards what the relaxations mean. It has been quite a difficult period, obviously. Like all the customer-facing businesses in the West End, their whole business model has been predicated on 7 days a week trading, huge numbers of people, and a generally more affluent footfall, I would say. So the volumes of spending have always been high here. And to have the tap turned off, as that had to be at the beginning of the lockdown, has been a huge knock to people's confidence. Shaftesbury's always focused on the more niche sort of businesses. We're not really interested in the mainstream brands, whether it's F&B or retail. We've always felt that people come into these very historic parts of the West End to find something a little bit different. We've got a lot of older, smaller buildings, so we're playing to our strength in creating a more interesting, diverse tenant mix, not institutional in its sort of mix. But of course, those businesses have been hit particularly hard. Or you could say their appetite to reopen will be determined by where they see the footfall. It's particularly difficult for restaurants because they do carry a much higher overhead than retailers in terms of, well, the whole cost of having a restaurant fitting out. Staffing levels are really much higher than you sit in the front of a restaurant. You have no idea the number of people that are behind the scenes make it all happen. You know, got some restaurants that employ over 200 people to trade 7 days a week. They're just factories in a way. So for those businesses, they need the certainty of footfall. They all accept that it's going to grow slowly. We're trying to think of all the ways, along with the City Council, we can support their recovery by bringing that footfall back. But I think the reality is not all are going to open straight away. And, you know, we have to be conscious of the fact these businesses can only stay in hibernation for so long. These are generally privately owned businesses. It's not that easy for them to survive a long lockdown. So looking beyond the immediate summer months, and there is a great opportunity if we can, you know, find the right arrangements with the City Council to, you know, make best use of these summer months to give these businesses more of a chance to trade and use outdoor space. That's absolutely critical. But you know, we have to be conscious, and I agree with Jace, the recovery here is not 3 months, it's probably 18 months or possibly longer, depending on when we actually do start to feel confident about the way we spend and the way we live our lives. You know, even for those businesses, you know, F&B relies an awful lot on pre-Christmas trade. That's what Christmas is all about, being social and spending money, being out with your friends, your work colleagues. Most of that market will not be there this Christmas. I mean, that's the reality. Social distancing will still need to be in place. Corporate entertaining is going to be zero, I think, over the Christmas period for lots of reasons, not least because it's quite inappropriate in a sort of depressed situation for businesses to be splashing the cash on entertaining. That's just not going to work. And then we have to look out beyond the immediate to think about January, February and March, which are never great months in retailing or F&B. You know, we parted till Christmas. So I think we must plan for a slower trajectory of recovery, and the measures we put in place now, I think in reality, some of them may need to be there for some time, but it's building the confidence at the end of the day to get people to come back. That's what it's all about.
I think you're right. I think the confidence is key, and you have plans for a Soho summer street festival, and you know, that sounds like a really positive idea to get some of the younger people who are, you know, more willing to, you know, and very keen to have sort of social experience and try and get them back. How are those plans going?
Well, I have to stop you there, Susan. It's not our initiative. It's you know, we support the idea of events to bring people back, but actually it's a Soho Estates. I have to give a plug to somebody else here. It's a Soho Estates idea. And we do support these things, but we'd be the first to say it's not just like throwing a party. These events are quite complicated. They need a lot of investment and planning and time to make them work right, because we know it's got to work, or you only get one shot at this of bringing people back. If we're going to do an event, it's got to be a quality event that works for everybody, including residents. It's got to be properly managed. And it's not a matter of sort of hoisting up a banner and saying, let's have a party, because actually the danger is having the wrong sort of behaviours coming out of that will actually damage possibly the prospects of some longer term structural changes in the way we use the West End. So we do think sort of some moderation around this, and you know, we are slightly concerned that, you know, a hot sunny weekend will start, you know, bring too much vertical drinking to our streets. It's not what any of us particularly want. So we need to manage through this situation so we find a sustainable way, if we think that's the future, of how we use the public space around the West End. It's potentially a fantastic asset to bring people into the West End. And it's tricky because this is such an intensively used area. The City Council have a great sympathy. They're pulled in a number of different directions to find solutions for all of this. But I do think we generally, as one of our longer term ambitions, is to make this a more pedestrian friendly, more open location for people to move around in. The quality of the experience then will help support the long term prospects for the West End.
Okay. I think, so is my sound, can you hear me? Okay. So you mentioned obviously the relationship with Westminster Council, which is obviously key to making all this work. So let's turn to Rachael as leader of the council. Obviously, the West End is a real, you know, key asset. And we've heard a little bit from Brian about some of the issues of, trying to, bring people back into the West End. But from the council's viewpoint, what have been, your key challenges in relation to the reopening?
Well, what I'd say is, I suppose there's two phases here that I'd address. One is the actual lockdown itself and what we were able to do during that period to support businesses. So obviously key for us was keeping the city running, keeping all the streets clean and the refuse working, which is really important. The other key thing that we were able to achieve was to lobby government to raise the cap on business rates, which for many businesses, we have very high business rates in Westminster, and the initial proposal in the budget allowed relief only for 5% of our hospitality businesses, which would have been critical. And what's so interesting is so many businesses say that having the business rate relief cap taken off, so all retail, hospitality and leisure businesses now having that relief, has made the difference between being able to survive or not. So that was really important. But clearly now the focus is all around how we get the West End back up and running. It's a really critical part of Westminster, indeed of the whole country. So it's really important. And for the City Council, it's really important as a retail centre, but also, as Brian and Jace have both been saying, we've got a huge F&B sector here, 3,700 licensed premises in Westminster. So this is really critical. First step was what we called the movement strategy, which was really to enable people to have the confidence to move about safely in the West End and the other areas of this, and square meters of exiting cycle paths, which is really important for people to feel confident about going out shopping again, going to Oxford Street, going to Bond Street, etc. But the other really important bit now is how we plan for the reopening of the hospitality sector on Saturday. And that is critical. The City Council, we have worked incredibly hard on this. Clearly, there is more work to be done. And some things we'll get right, some things we haven't. But I think we've gone further than any other council in terms of trying to put in place measures to support our hospitality sector. It's difficult because we have to balance not only the hospitality sector, which is critical, but also our residents' interests. And of course, other businesses need to be able to move about, get their deliveries, their freight, their waste delivery and waste collections. So when we're operating a city like Westminster, we have to balance all of these issues. But I think the measures that we've put in place to support the hospitality sector, I hope will really go a long way to doing this. But I have to say the other key message is the hospitality sector also needs to work with us, because I think we have to make sure that people are observing social distancing, and I think, as Brian mentioned, we have to be really careful about vertical drinking and people not spilling out too much into the streets, because clearly we need to show that we can manage this, that people can go back safely to the hospitality sector and really enjoy it in a safe way.
Yes, it is all about collaboration, isn't it? Sort of trying to balance everybody's interests, and hopefully, the residents that live in some of these areas will want to be supportive of the local businesses, because I think unless some of them can have some outside, dining, it's going to be really difficult for them to observe the social distancing rules. So, fingers crossed for when all this opens. So, Sheila, let's turn to you. You're a key advisor to leading international owners of prime retail. So you are seeing how this is impacting across the world. How are retail owners seeing the emergence from lockdown, and what are their challenges? Because from their point of view, it must be extremely difficult as well. Unmute.
There we go. Thanks, Susan. Yeah, it's actually quite a similar picture across Europe, UK and North America, in that all our clients are generally trying to stabilize their businesses. Some of the European countries obviously been ahead of us coming out of lockdown. And I'd say with the prime shopping centres, probably footfall is around about 50 to 70% in Europe. But because people are going with the intention to shop, same kind of thing that Jace was saying, you know, conversion rates are up. So it's interesting. But obviously a different picture in New York, Paris, as it is in London, you know, very difficult, you know, big reliance on the tourists as well. So similar problems to the West End to tackle. I'd say in terms of challenges for the landlords, I mean, it's been a huge issue just looking at, with retailers wanting discounts and deferrals of rent. I mean, it's massive, you know, huge amount of work. And that's still ongoing. You know, it's a difficult time. And a lot of landlords have got different approaches. And in the US, it's been particularly difficult. And you've now got big landlords like Simon and Brookfield, you know, suing retailers for millions of dollars. So it's, yeah, we're not over that problem yet. You know, that's kind of ongoing. And it's a huge challenge still to get people back into the centres, the enclosed centres. But I'm always amazed at, you know, some of the innovative ideas that are coming forward. And one of our clients, Unibail Rodamco, they've actually, you've probably read in the press, partnered with Zalando to create with their centres to be more like micro-fulfillment centres. I guess their view is that if you can't beat them, join them. But it's early days, but you know, it's quite interesting how those two elements are coming together. So, you know, there's lots of different ideas coming forward, which is positive, but, you know, still a big challenge over the next 6 months.
And it's interesting how social media comes into this, because Primark, who, you know, seem to have huge queues on the, you know, when they reopened, don't sell online, but they've been really active on social media, and their social media engagement had gone up something, you know, like 200%. So, you know, that's all these things, you know, are part of what the retailers are having to think about. And just in terms of collections, I think, you know, our retail rental collection on the June quarter day in the UK was something like 14%, which is, you know, difficult for landlords. I mean, is that similar in other parts of the world?
It is. I mean, it is actually. It's kind of everywhere. And you know, retailers are in such a strong position at the moment, and they're going for gold. You know, you've got some who you know, who can afford to pay the rent and actually are paying, but some who can afford and not paying. You know, and it's mixed across the piece. So it is the same. It's the same picture internationally.
Okay, well that's interesting. So let's roll forward a little bit, you know, and look at the more medium term. Say, you know, the next 18 months. So Jace, for you, what does phase 2 look like, and what sort of increases in footfall are you hoping for?
Yeah. I mean, it might be phase 4 in 18 months to sort of what we're going through at the moment, but I think you know, Sheila touched on this. For retail particularly, there's been such a pronounced shift to online, which we knew was happening anyway, but the Band-Aid is well and truly ripped off, and actually the new normal is very different. What's happened in 6 months would have been 10 years potentially.
Yeah.
I was reading the other day, in 2000 there was no online. We're sort of 20% online now. We could be at 50% within 5 years. So you look at that growth trajectory of what's happening in the sector. And I think, you know, we look around the world and we put the West End into this basket of great sort of global city of retail and leisure and everything that comes with that, the quality, the offer, the customer experience. And I think for us, what's going to be key is that we remain relevant to that customer. And actually, I don't necessarily buy this argument of secondary and then primary, because I think it's now about relevant retail destinations and leisure destinations and non-relevant. You know, and I think we're relevant to our local customers that live in the area, to our office workers, to our international visitors. And I think as long as we can continue to be relevant and have an offer where people want to spend time and obviously their money with us and want to come to the area, But linked to that is this sustainability. So we talk about the rise of online, but there is definitely a shift that was already happening of the customer wanting to shop. And also people want to work in sustainable businesses, shopping in sustainable companies. And actually we talk about purpose a lot, don't we? And we've seen a lot of that through COVID and the lockdown. But I think for those big city centres like us and other big global capitals, having a sense of sustainability, both economic and environmental and social, is going to be key for us. You've got to match the customer demand with the investment with policy. And the good news is in the West End, we have an incredibly strong city council that understands this, and we have long-term property owners that take a long-term view. And I don't think that's universal up and down the country in sort of towns and cities. So we're quite fortunate we have the ingredients. I think it'll be the pace of that change and that momentum that we can respond to with the customers going to be for our success in the next 5 and 10 years. And I'm sure Rachel will come on to Oxford Street and the wider West End district, because that is a key catalyst, I think, for unlocking the change that customers want when they come to somewhere like the West End.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jason, and that was going to be my next question to Rachel. We've been talking about using this this pandemic as a catalyst for change, and one of the changes we've seen is there've been much fewer cars in the West End, and I just wondered whether we will see more pedestrianisation, and what your thoughts are now on the pedestrianisation of Oxford Street.
I think there's a real opportunity to capitalise on the difference that we've seen over this period. And certainly I've already started to talk to key stakeholders, the other landowners and great estates in Westminster, about how we can really drive change now in terms of deliveries, freight, waste, commercial waste collection. The interesting thing is we've still got a huge amount, before this period, we still had a huge amount of traffic on our roads, but it's not people driving their cars. And we know that because our resident parking income is falling significantly. So it's other methods of traffic on our roads, deliveries, a huge amount. So how can we come up with really sensible solutions to that? And actually, it's something that I'm already working with government on, and I'm really hopeful that we're going to get some traction in terms of being able to really deliver something through this period. But the other thing, and I think this is really important, Jace talked about this, we have some really exciting plans for the whole of the Oxford Street district. This needs to be, we really need to focus on this as an exciting destination area. So that does involve, what can we do around hospitality? We want to make this an area that people say we have to go to London to go and visit Oxford Street, to go not just to shop, but to have lunch, to be somewhere that my children, you, me, anyone would want to go and visit. And that we need to be much more ambitious in terms of our green agenda for the area, but also the smart city agenda, how we can really harness technology to make this a really fantastic project. So we had already announced plans for a significant investment project, but I think working with key stakeholders that we can push this much further and really deliver something exciting in the area.
Just one thing to add on that, I think the air quality benefits, I saw some statistics that actually we've reduced the pollution by about 50% in the West End. But imagine Regent Street, which has been obviously awful to see without people. I've been going to the office every week, but actually it could be a wonderful green corridor from Regent's Park all the way down. And I think we want those boulevards, we want those green corridors. And I was really encouraged when you took over, Rachel, as leader, that one of your first commitments was the environment. And actually we can start to see some of this in the next couple of years, because that again is going to encourage customers and also office workers to come back to the area.
Can I just say, as a resident, Rachel, you'll get my vote if that's top of the agenda, because residents do truly value it. And particularly in the centre, when you get into the centre of the streets around Soho, people live there as well. They're living with congestion every day and probably the worst air quality. So we must help them understand that, if we're going to solve some of these problems, there's going to have to be a bit of give and take. They can't, we can't all have all the things we want, as you said, but it's finding those practical solutions. And I sometimes think pedestrianisation is the wrong word. It's traffic management. Traffic will never completely disappear. That's not realistic, but it's how we manage and where we give priority at certain times of the day, I think. And there must be solutions. Other cities find way through. So I'm sure we will find a way through. And now we've seen what can be achieved through a slightly unfortunate set of circumstances.
Yeah, well, it will help if we, if we can get Transport for London sort of back up and running, so so that people can get to the West End more easily. So, Sheila, sorry, you wanted to say something?
Oh no, it's okay. That's
okay,
fine.
all right. Fine. So, turning to Brian, from the Shaftesbury viewpoint, how do you see things progressing over the next 18 months?
Well, so it'll be a gradual recovery process, and I'm absolutely certain we will get there. There could be some bumps along the way, as we've seen today. You know, the city's gone down into lockdown because problems have reoccurred, and we have to be prepared for the news sometimes being less optimistic than we want it to be. But come through this, we will. I think there has been a sort of change in people's behaviours, and everything's been accelerated by these 13 weeks. It's quite incredible, really. We forget that the West End isn't a shopping centre or shopping destination. It's also a fantastic cultural hub, and those cultural assets we have here in Westminster are huge drivers of footfall. There are so many moving parts in this city. It's quite remarkable, really, but they all need to work together. That's absolutely important, so not to ignore the other things. But to create this experience, and we have simple mantras at Shaftesbury. We will never wake up in the morning and assume anybody's going to come to the West End, let alone come to any of our areas. You've got to make it that quality experience of finding something different, and having the long-term owners involved is really important. And we've seen a gradual movement towards F&B, but that's not the answer to everything. We must ask ourselves that a lot of the building stock has evolved into lots of things over the years. We've got buildings that are over 200 years old. We've got to make sure we have arrangements that facilitate this repurposing of buildings. Don't pull them all down, because that's not very sustainable. And it's that sense of movement and adapting buildings to provide what people want, and not just dealing with the public realm, looking at the buildings as well, I think is really important. And sustainability and ethical behaviour and feeling that you're in a good place will be key to bringing people back.
Do you see that there's going to be a change in the way you let space coming out of this this period? Do you
well,
see?
I suppose we've never been what you call an institutional landlord. We've never had long leases. We've always experimented people who have no obvious, they've got great ideas, but not much of a balance sheet to talk about. Our whole ethos has been to try new things. We've always been underpinned by an incredibly secure location. But if not all of our ideas or people we choose work, somebody else will come along. That in itself is going to be a bit more challenging in the next period. But for us, shorter leases are inevitable. The whole philosophy of actually supporting our tenants, again, because if they're not prospering, we won't prosper. So it's everything we do around our areas. We're a bit like the other estates. We can control an area and give it a purpose and a justification for it. Quite long-term investment, which the more challenged streets don't have that cohesive ownership. But I think it has to change. Property has to be a bit more tenant-friendly, and it is a partnership, as we're seeing now. We are truly all in this together.
Yeah, there is a question from one of our listeners, which actually I will start with Sheila on this one. And again, thinking ahead over the next 18 months, what is the future for physical retail? And are we going to see it becoming more experiential, which is something that we've been talking about for some time?
Yeah, I actually do think that, so I agree with Jace that obviously internet during this time has grown, but there's always people will always want to go and experience and do exciting things, and it's just the landlords and the property owners are going to just have to work harder to get to get the shopper back in and the confidence. But there's always, to me, I work on the new brands, what's happening internationally across the piece, and there's so many new emerging brands coming through, and we're tracking at the moment over 100 direct-to-consumer brands, and those type of brands are some really exciting ones. And I actually do think they're going to be the J. Crews, the Gaps of the future. And they're getting a lot of attraction from investors now, and that's kind of what people want. And Brian's business, Shaftesbury, have always focused on that, and I think other landlords across the UK need to be doing the same thing. It's going to be hard work, and what we need to do is get a lot closer to the retailers. You know, we can't just take a property approach anymore. Like that's gone. You know, the whole model is changing, and we're going to have to, with the internet and omni-channel, it's complex, and we have to get to understand, you know, what's going on in those areas. And I'm actually I work with Unibail Rodamco, and they've just put together a catalogue of all their vacant units internationally. And now, for the first time, we're actually focused on these direct-to-consumer emerging brands. But the model's going to be different, and they recognise that. So we're actually coming up with a model to make that work. So, you know, there's a lot going on, but it's about changing and, you know, getting closer to these businesses and looking at who they are and, you know, giving them a chance.
I mean, just to add to that, Sheila, I mean, I was talking to some landlords earlier this week. We've had 4 deals transact last week of brands that we've not seen in the West End. There are 3 on Bond Street, 1 on Oxford Street, on Bruton Street. So I think, you know, there's a commitment and a belief in Central London and the West End particularly. And I think what also is encouraging is our designation in the city plan, both at London level and with Westminster Council, is international centre status, which allows flexibility at ground floor, different uses. And that, again, you know, these direct-to-consumer brands that 5 years ago wouldn't take physical space,
exactly,
have a location, you know, in the West End. You know,
and I think, you know, just on that point, you know, retailers don't make money, you know, online. It's difficult to make money online. You know, they want physical stores, and it's up to them to create this experience. And, you know, so I'm pretty positive about it, even though the next 6 months to 18 months are probably going to be difficult. There's these new brands emerging.
I think West End has a lot of aces to play here in terms of its whole offer, its broad offer, and the fact that we do come into this. I mean, Sheila, I think I'm right in saying we're probably the most highly regarded retailing city on the planet for our variety. So we shouldn't write ourselves off.
No.
But we have to get used to the fact that it will change faster than ever. That's what technology has been doing for a long time. So there's no brands anymore that will last 25 years. They will have to keep reinventing themselves. There might be the same owners behind it, but the name over the front door will keep changing. And that's how the West End needs to adapt and encourage that.
Exactly.
That's positive, and I think let's turn to the new dawn for the West End to just finish off this this discussion. So, Jace, the future for the West End. You've said that in 5 years there will be 30% less retail space. What's going to replace retail, and what in your vision for the West End will the mix of space look like?
Get my crystal ball out, Susan.
Exactly.
The point might have been covered. I mean, I think we all recognise this as a collective enterprise, and we've got to get the investment and the policy and demand and just take it back to first principles. What do customers want to do to spend their time? And actually, I was really encouraged by Microsoft in 2 ways. They announced earlier this week they're closing all of their retail apart from London, New York and Sydney. Yeah. And Oxford Circus, fantastic Microsoft store there. And they said, we're not in retail now, we're in the experience business. And that to me is the start of what we all know is going to happen and what we want to create in this West End International Centre, of the very best of that experience. And whether it's retail, community, even residential, commercial, office, we want it to be the very best it can be in a sustainable way. So without being prescriptive of what the brands are going to be, I think this flexibility and agility is really important, and that movement. And I think also we have these most incredible buildings and heritage that we shouldn't lose sight that is a draw, not to go to a Westfield, I hate to say it, or another city in the world, but actually it's a major draw to come to the West End. And Brian touched on culture. I mean, I read this morning, New York, they're not opening their theatres till the 1st of January, which is really depressing actually, but we know how important the mix of the galleries and the theatre is to our whole ecology. So we should never take it for granted. But I think, you know, on a positive note, everyone understands the scale of change. Everyone wants to make this an endeavour that we can actually be positive about and sustain the West End, not just for 5 or 10 years, but for 50 years. And that's exciting, actually. And I think we have to remember retailers are incredibly entrepreneurial and innovative. And actually, out of these crises, I'm sure we're going to see some great changes. And for me personally, and I think for a lot of us in the West End, that's quite exciting, actually. Some will fail, Some could be the next, you know, Apple or Microsoft, who knows? But isn't that exciting that we are a test bed for that, and we've got the right environment to create that test bed in the West End?
It's definitely exciting. And Rachel, for Westminster Council, it's an amazing opportunity to capture some of this and drive positive change. So Jace is obviously talking about, you know, retail use going down. Does this mean that from the council's point of view, you are changing the way you view uses within the sort of Oxford Street, Bond Street, Regent Street area, and that we'll be seeing more hospitality and other uses to counter the reduced retail?
I think we'll absolutely have to be flexible as we go forward, because, you know, this is all about how we encourage people to come to this area. How do we maintain it but future-proof it as a really exciting, interesting place that we all want to go? And, you know, I think, you know, we might be all shopping more on the internet, but let's face it, we all love going to the shops. I love going to the shops, we all do. But it has to be an enjoyable experience. So there has to be some hospitality mixed in with it. It has to be a wonderful environment. It has to be a wonderful green environment. It has to be clean air. It has to be somewhere where we actually want to spend time. So I think that's the challenge for us. The West End is a jewel in the heart of Westminster, and we need to absolutely work together, all of us, our stakeholders, with our businesses, with our resident community, to look at how we can really invest to make the West End even better for future generations than it is. I think there's a huge opportunity. Let's be honest, some parts of it are looking tired, but that's the opportunity for us to really invest and make something even more special. And it's interesting about the culture. Obviously, there's a fabulous culture offer in terms of in the West End, but also our buildings. I don't think at the moment, with the way some of the streets are configured, we really notice the garden squares and these fabulous historic buildings enough. So that's something else that we can do as part of this, I think.
Yeah, it is. No, it's going to be an interesting few years, and we've only got a few minutes left. So Sheila and Brian, I mean, Brian, you mentioned, you know, the ACEs. What if you just had to name one key thing that will help the West End retain its allure and make sure that it continues to be sort of up there competing with other global cities? What is it we have to do?
I think people, and particularly younger people, and we shouldn't forget that, you know, the future has to be planned for younger people, not those of us who possibly at the other end of the spectrum and have less skin in the game. Young people have some very strong views about what they want and what they don't want. London needs to remember it's got this fantastic brand, this authenticity. People come to London, they don't want a homogenized experience that you can get in any other city. London has got this most fantastic heritage and culture and all of those things, and we need to sell the whole package to people and not just be focused on one thing. And remember, there's a multi-age groups here. Those different groups will get different things out of the West End as well. So it's that breadth of experience. And I was wondering why I think this collaboration, if we all collaborate, and I'd be a great advocate for rejuvenating the West End Partnership. I think particularly in this difficult time to bring the City Council, the landowners, the businesses and the residents in the room together and say, this is all in our interest, let's get the show on the road again. I think will be a useful way forward, because frankly, none of us, you know, we need that operator input. I think those who run the businesses, they're that really coalface of sort of us all understanding what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. Sheila, one game changer.
Yeah, just following on with what Brian says, I think it's about embracing change. It's about flexibility. It's about accepting that, you know, the internet's here to stay. Don't fight that. But actually, then we need to create this great experience that Jace was talking about, and you know we can do that. I remember back, you know, and it's about the flexible model, flexible lease model. You know, looking at all these new brands. There's some great entrepreneurs out there. But we need to be flexible with them. And I remember, you all remember the time when, you know, with Selfridges, when Vittorio Radici came in, and he had the freedom to completely change that model. And look how successful that's been. But at the time, people were criticizing him. It's all about design, but it was a great experience. So these things, you know, evolve and happen.
We need to do a Selfridges on the West End. I mean, it's one of the great. and they epitomise everything that the customer wants, and they keep evolving and changing.
Exactly.
They're one of the most successful in the world. So yeah, I do Selfridges on the West End. That's a nice.
That's good.
remark.
Very good. Okay, well, I think our time is up, and I can't wait to get back to the West End, because I normally spend most of my life there. So I'm looking forward to it. So huge thank you to the panel for a great discussion, and I'll hand back to Lee.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you to all the panel. It's great to hear such passion from all of you, from all involved in different aspects of the West End. And it was such a positive discussion, wasn't it? I think going forward, the idea of collaboration between the retailers, between those involved in resi, in offices, you know, it's very clear it might take, like you say, 18 months or so to really pick up. But in that time, you can reimagine, rethink, what can you do with in terms of sustainability? How can you reimagine the cultural elements? You know, it clearly is a time for opportunity. I guess there's going to be a lot more competition as to which retailers survive and innovate and adapt quicker, and the brands might change. But we have to be positive, and we have to see it as an opportunity. And it's nice to see everybody working together. And I'm confident that they will continue to do so. So thank you so much to all of you for your time today. It's been such a valuable discussion. We will put it on our YouTube channel in a bit, so people will be able to view and to listen again. But thank you to all. Thank you to our viewers today. And just to remind everybody that our next event is Lunch with Andy Street, CBE, of course, Mayor of the West Midlands, which is on the 9th of July. We've then got a series of 3 events on livability coming up, 3 events on asset management, and lots more that are going to be coming up on our virtual programme. So lots to look forward to. Thank you once again to you all, to our contributors. Keep safe from our family to yours. Thank you. Have a good day.